understand, we're going to be talking about mainly chemical addiction, but so easily accessible. And it really, both of these addictions, chemical addiction and or a substance addiction and sexual addiction, pornography addiction stuff, is a chemical addiction. We now know that. Neuroscience has shown that it's actually a chemical addiction. So understanding the brain disease concept, that we are actually dealing with chemicals in the brain, is critical to treating this. And there is a exciting movement afoot in the addiction recovery system nationwide. We are in the process of striving to move away from the acute model of treatment to the recovery management or ongoing lifetime process of treatment. And that's coming down from the national level because, as I mentioned, I've been in this field a long time, and we have people go to programs and then they graduate from the program, and which means what? You're done. You're fixed. You no longer should have this problem. But what happens with addiction issues? It's just like, oh, these programs don't work. You know, and we hear that a lot of times, and we have people who the recidivism rate is so great that they just go to program and then they'll go out a while and come back. I mean, right now I oversee the House of Hope, which is a residential facility with moms and their kids, and also the Promise program, which is an outpatient program that deals with them after they get out of the House of Hope. At least half of our clients are well known to us. I mean, they've been in the system in our treatment facilities 3 or 4 or even 5 times. And so we need to change the way we do things. And even today, I just came, just before I got here, a quite heated managers meeting with all of our managers as we're talking about this paradigm shift. We no longer want to have what's called graduation ceremonies from treatment, because we're kind of fighting against what we're doing. It's not a graduation, it's a transition into a lifetime issue, and how to manage that is what we're dealing with now. So in essence, understanding addiction is that we're dual beings. We have a physical body, and that's where the chemical interaction comes about, and then we have this energy inside of us. Some call it a spirit. But there's something in us that's different than the actual physical body, because when this energy leaves our bodies, what happens? We die. Okay? So basic definition of addiction, and this is across the board. An individual has an experience associated with pleasure. Okay? I've had individuals tell me the first time that they used a substance, alcohol, or see pornography for the first time, it's an extremely pleasurable experience. And that's memorized in a certain part of the brain called the hippocampus, and I'll show you a little more about that, how the what I call the 2-part brain works in the limbic system. And then after a while, an individual becomes preoccupied with continuing to receive that pleasure. Tolerance increases. What does tolerance mean? Have to do more and more to have the same type of a feeling, okay? And then that turns into a compulsion where it just kind of dominates the thinking. I can't wait till Friday night where I can have a drink. I can't wait till I have some free time at home where I can get on the internet and everyone's asleep or something like that. And then there starts to be negative consequences as time goes along. And then an individual promises to stop doing whatever it is they're doing that's creating those negative consequences, and then they continue to do it. You know, the commitment after commitment after commitment to stop a certain behavior doesn't seem to lend itself to actually behaviorally getting there. And so why is that? That's what this presentation hopes to be able to explain. And then at the core of an addiction is this intense craving that drives it. And those who become addicted, it's critical to understand they don't want this craving. I've had individuals come into me pleading and begging for a way to have this thing go away. They don't want it. And those who don't really understand addiction, you know, and they condemn them and think they're bad people and not moral and all that stuff, it's just not true. It has to do with a certain part of the brain. And so addiction offers, you know, one of the words that we use, or little statements we use over and over again in the addiction field is, 1 time is too many, and 1,000 never enough. There's a certain part of the brain that never gets satisfied that drives these addictive behaviors. This is a recent email I received from an individual. I haven't cried in years. I want to cry to somebody about my addiction. I want to yell and scream because I feel no one understands how I feel. And I'm afraid if I open up, I will be rejected and feel stupid. And so there's a great tendency to keep these inner struggles underground and not open up and talk about them, which feeds the addiction. And again, that statement, I want to yell and scream because I feel no one understands how I feel. Okay, understanding the human brain. This is a picture, a classic picture, I don't know if you can see that really clearly, of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This is something that I have posted in my office, and when individuals come in, they will, usually to get them in the door to treatment. That's the first challenge. Down at Utah County Division of Substance Abuse, we did a study on what got people into our door, and how many would you say came there of their own accord saying, I've got a problem and I want some help? What would you say? A little higher than 0, but almost. It was 7%. So 7% of all of the assessments that we do at the Division of Substance Abuse approximately come in on their own. Otherwise, they're referred family members, courts, things like that. So the denial covering addiction is very powerful, and I'll explain why. So an individual comes in and they'll say to me, I want to stop. I'm ready to do anything to stop doing what I'm doing. And I'll pause and stand back a minute, and then I'll say to them, but there's also another part of you, isn't there, that doesn't really want to stop. And it's like, I've seen this many times, they kind of sit back and have a little smirk on their face, and they go, like they've been caught, they go, yeah. And well, what is that other part? The best way to describe that is by this diagram I call the 2-part brain. This little red part down here is known as the limbic system. In essence, we have 2 brains that work in concert with each other all the time. The limbic system is known more as our primitive brain, our instinctive brain, and the prefrontal cortex, or neocortex, and more specifically the prefrontal cortex, is the higher functioning brain where our morals and values are and so forth. The balance between these 2 brains will determine the quality of our lives. And the limbic is the emotional, and the prefrontal is what's known as our rational brain. In our brains, we have 100 billion neurons, 1 quadrillion connections, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with the interaction that takes place in the brain and the neurotransmitters between a chemical signal and an electrical signal. It's that little chemical signal, these little neurotransmitters, that are the thing that creates the problems.